Great. Thanks, Pete. I got to know Nicole reasonably well last year over the telephone. And the reason for that was she was our nominee for the REWA, Rotary International Women's Awards. And I was very proud to be able to represent our club by nominating Nicole. I think there was something like, 1,400, 1,500 entrants that particular year, but she got our vote for sure. Nicole, as Thomas said, is a mother of four. She had some experience in the past herself with domestic violence, and this brought to fruition the fact that she's worked now for over 20 years helping traumatized people. Pretty amazing, and she's still coming up with ideas of how to improve situations. Before going to Luz, which was, I think, in 2017, she worked for 8 years with the Red Cross, and during that time it was mainly with refugee services. She also set up the community detention program to provide an alternative to placing children in immigration detention. Then she moved on to TAFE, where she was mainly mentoring Aboriginal students and helping them. She moved from there to Relationships Australia, set up counselling and support services for childhood abuse, and she was instrumental in calling for a national redress scheme following the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. So well done, Nicole. Pretty amazing background. In addition to that and the 4 children, she did a lot of volunteer work. One organisation, she was founder and volunteer of a group called Good Neighbour to support new refugees to Australia. She was also the founder and board member of Host International, which was a volunteer organisation to provide casework services to refugees on Nauru. Founder and board member of Australian African Network to support interracial families. She's currently volunteer secretary and board member to Domestic Violence New South Wales, and that is a representative body for domestic violence services. Moving on to Luz Place in 2017, there, of course, she assists vulnerable women suffering from childhood sexual abuse mainly, which is pretty distressing, domestic violence, mental illness, drug addiction, and homelessness. So she has the responsibility with the team for rebuilding their lives. Pretty impressive. While she's been at Luz, and she can tell you more about this, she established Always Mum, an innovative program that works with women whose children have been removed from their care, and she keeps it. The reason for this is to try and come up with some sort of reconciliation with the family. She continues to campaign actively for greater community awareness of women's homelessness, more social housing, access to health and social services, in conjunction with the Premier, Governor of New South Wales, Lord Mayor of Sydney, and they support these campaigns with her. During COVID, this was the real test. Apart from anything else, I'm exhausted for her already. She's established at Luz during COVID a Woman's Worth, which is on domestic violence education program for women, Upward Spiral, mental health and wellbeing group for women, Kindness Calls, volunteers are matched with vulnerable women in the community to provide emotional support and ease isolation. Apart from anything else, having studied at Sydney University, Oxford University, I'm proud to say that Nicole was one of only 15 women in Australia nominated by Amnesty International for championing human rights. Well done, Nicole. Pretty amazing stuff. So thank you so much, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Dale, for such a generous introduction, and lovely to be with all of you tonight. Thank you for taking time out of lockdown to sit with me, and I hope at some time we'll be able to do it in person together as well. Firstly, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land upon which we kind of meet today. I want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, because I think that's a really important place to start in the work that I do at Lou's Place. Apart from all the different challenges that many of the women who I work with experience, the Aboriginal women, who make up about 30% of the women that we serve at Lou's Place, have additional challenges due to the history that we have in Australia. So thank you so much for the invitation to talk to you today. I thought I would just touch a little bit on Lou's Place. For those of you who don't know us, we are a daytime refuge in Victoria Street, so just across from your usual meeting spot. And we are in a 3-story terrace there, and we are a daytime refuge for women. So what that means, sometimes people say, what the hell is that? We don't have people sleeping overnight with us, but about 30% of the women we serve are rough sleepers. So they are the women that you see sleeping on the streets of Sydney. And Lou's Place is a place that they can come in the day to have a shower, to have some breakfast or some lunch, to do their washing, to meet with a case manager who can sit with them and make a plan and help them meet some of their goals. But they are only one part of the work that we do at Lou's Place. We work with whoever would like to work with us. So all day at Lou's Place, you will hear that doorbell going, and anybody is able to ring our door, drop into our centre, and we'll be seen the same day and have a response from our staff in terms of responding to whatever is happening to the women, whatever issues they walk in the door with, which is quite extraordinary and quite different to a number of services that exist in the community. And part of why we're able to do things in that way is because we are independently funded. So a lot of the government funding that exists will, for example, have certain requirements. So if you're newly homeless in the last 3 months, maybe you will be eligible for up to 6 months case management support. At Lou's Place, we're not really interested in when you became homeless or how recently that was or other kind of criteria or cutoffs. If you're a woman and you're needing help and you want to work with us, we will work with you, and we will do that for as long as you would like to receive that support. And for a number of the women that we work with, that kind of commitment and the length of time that we're able to support people is really critical in terms of ensuring a recovery and ensuring that we are there every step of the way. That long-term commitment is really, really important. I've often got my grandmother in my ear on that, problems that are, years in the making with the very best work are not going to disappear with the very best that staff have to offer in 3 months or 6 months. For a lot of the women that we serve, they have had experiences of really complex trauma over many, many years, typically in their childhood, sometimes even going on into their adulthood, and they require a long-term commitment to really get better and get well. Dale is absolutely right. For a number of the women that we work with, they've experienced childhood sexual abuse. On first presentation to our service, over 80% of women identify that as an experience. the majority of women is, over 90% of women on first presentation to our service talk to us about domestic violence as the primary reason they're seeking help in our service. And because of that domestic violence, very often people are experiencing homelessness. So we have an urgent kind of priority for the women that we meet to find them somewhere safe to stay. And unfortunately, although there's lots and lots of different government support in the mix, every night there are not enough beds in our city for the number of women who need that support. So we know at Lou's Place, on your average day, and in COVID it's probably worse again, unfortunately, half a dozen women who we haven't been able to find a bed for that night. And part of what we do will be to spend a bit of our own funding to make sure that people have somewhere safe to go until we can get in there, do lots of strong advocacy and find a more supported service option for people in the longer term. I guess one of the things I was talking to Dale about recently that I thought may be of interest to you is how the service system and the women that we support are experiencing COVID. And COVID has been one of those really tricky things that I think as a sector, we all found it really hard to deal with, and, certainly no one was expecting. This time around, I guess we have been a little bit more ready, but some of the challenges for us have been around the mental health presentations of the women that we serve. So while, the Premier is talking about some really sensible advice about getting vaccinated and staying at home and wearing a mask and washing your hands and doing all the right things, for many of the women that we support, they may not have a home to go to, so they're sleeping rough or they're moving between different hotel accommodations. They may be sleeping on the couch of friends' houses and wearing out their welcome somewhere and moving on to the next place. But also some of the women we work with, they really don't have somewhere to go. So I'm thinking about someone that we were working with just last week who came into the centre, and she's very well known to us, and probably many of you have seen her around the streets of Potts Point. And she said to us, and I said to her, I'd really like to find you somewhere to stay at the moment. It's freezing outside. I'm really worried about your safety. There's an opportunity here with COVID to get you into some hotels. We've had a bit of luck with, our advocacy efforts with the government for other people. And she said to me, you know what, Nicole, you don't have to worry about me. I've got magical powers. And I just said, I'm not sure what you mean. And she said, I know you guys are trying to do the right thing, but I have a bubble around me. COVID can't get me. Nicole, you've got such a good heart. I'm going to share my bubble with you. Zap, here it is. And I'm going to put a special bubble over Lou's Place as well. And don't worry, you guys will be fine. And it's those kind of people who really present some challenges for the services that exist at the moment around how do we help them engage with support when they're so unwell and their mental health is in such a poor state that they really don't understand always the crisis that we're in. And that's a bit of an extreme example, but variations of that are certainly not that uncommon and pretty they're the kind of conversations our team at Lose Place are having a lot at the moment with people who aren't very well, trying to help them understand what COVID means and trying to link them into the right kind of supports and give them some information about health education. I guess the other big one regarding COVID at the moment is a big group of women that we support who are the Always Mum cohort of women at Lose Place. And Dale mentioned them as well. At Lose, we have a whole program of support for women who have children in out-of-home care. So those women, for different reasons, sometimes because they were living in domestic violence, for example, the state have removed their children from their care. Those children are currently residing in foster care. Often the women that we work with at Lose have since left those relationships, are now no longer homeless, are getting back on their feet and are trying to re-establish and rebuild that trust and those relationships with their children who are in foster care. So we have 2 full-time workers at Lose who are dedicated to helping that group of women. And for many of those women, they get to see their children once a month for a couple of hours. It does vary depending on the case. But when lockdown hits, of course, all of those women lose those opportunities to visit their children and see their children and hear from them. And that has been a huge challenge for those mums. One of the pieces of work that we do at Lose Place is to help those mums to engage with their children in other ways. And unfortunately, the system doesn't just allow that to happen. It requires a lot of advocacy. So we have certainly been on the phones ringing child protection services and advocating for people to have opportunities through Zoom or FaceTime and other ways to still maintain and continue to build those relationships with their children. We have been very successful recently in that work, and we're seeing that with the right supports in place and the right legal advice as well, many of the women have been able to bring their children home out of foster care back into their care. We certainly only advocate for that when it's, safe to do so. But for many women, as time passes and they get things back on track, it's a very important part of the healing and recovery process to re-establish those relationships with their children. I think the other big one to give a plug for at Lose Place at the moment is around the Zoom classes and activities that we have running, just to try and keep people's head above water and have people giving people something to do and something to stay focused on that's positive and good for them. So every time there's a lockdown, the last one and this one as well, my team goes really quickly to work to establish a program of online activities. And sometimes it's not on Zoom because a lot of the women we work with don't have access to Zoom. So it might be via teleconference, where women can dial in and be part of a community and still participate in the community, because many of the women that we work with live alone. They are very isolated members of the community, and with their histories, they are perhaps more vulnerable than your standard member of the community. We talk about it at Lose as the lockdown blues, and there's certainly a fair bit of lockdown blues going around. I don't know about you guys, but I was crook last week and I can't say I was feeling on top of the world. So it's a very common experience for people to have. But I think reaching out and making sure that people are still linked into some supports, have a voice that they know on the other end of the line, encouraging them, at the moment, my team today are making jewelry kits to send out to people so they can make their own necklace. And, you know, we've been really creative about different things that we can send out, and we've established a book club, so everyone's reading a book together. Lots of different things that we're trying to do that we would usually do in person in the house, but at the moment we've got to just go that little extra bit further and be a bit more creative. I think the other thing that's really important is to say is that Lou's Place remains open, even though we are not open in the same way that we would be with no lockdown. Of course, you know, we have to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe and following the health orders. But for women who are experiencing violence, it's very important for them to know that they can still leave home, that there are still places that they can go to sit down with someone, make a plan, get the right support. And, you know, we are an essential service, so we are open. We don't look like we do right now. We are covered up with masks, and I've never sanitized and washed my hands so much. But, you know, in order to stay open and keep providing that essential service to people who need it, that's what we've got to do. We have, this week I've been so inspired already. We've had volunteers at home cooking meals, dropping them off at Lou's, the most beautiful meals. And, you know, when someone drops into our centre, we're able to give them some meals and say, hey, stay at home, keep, if it's safe to do so, you know, keep off the trains. Here's some meals to keep you going for the next little while. Here's a gift voucher to get you through the next little while, and really provide that frontline emergency support. So we couldn't do it without the support of our community. We're so very, very grateful to all of you for, you know, your encouragement and love, you know, just getting to know Dale a little bit more most recently. You know, her kind words in a hard week have meant a lot to me so many times. So thank you, Dale, always for being on the other end of the phone and saying, go on, do it, you know, keep going. Sometimes in our work that really gets you across the line. So it's been lovely to know that Rotary are cheering us on, and just thank you all for, you know, having that community spirit and that heart to give back, because at these times, I know a lot of community organisations are so very grateful for that support, and it means the world to us. So thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what's going on at Lou's at the moment. Would love to you know, continue to connect with you all, and happy to answer any questions that you might have tonight as well.
Nicole, would you talk a little bit about the upcoming move down to Renwick, and how your services are going to expand?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So it's about 2 years now, Lou's Place has been running a capital campaign to purchase a new home. At the moment, we're in Victoria Street in a very small 3-story terrace with very, very steep stairs. And about 50% of the women we serve are over 55. And I've got to tell you, my heart skips a beat sometimes seeing some women with some pretty serious mobility issues trying to make it up those stairs some days. So we have successfully bought a new property in Redfern, and it's a much flatter and much bigger new home for us without some of those risk issues. And we hope to be into the new place by the end of the year. We've still got a little bit of fundraising to do to fit out the new home and make sure that we've got everything in there we need to move in. But we really hope that the new home will will give us an opportunity to reach even more women and to be able to do that in the safest way possible. At the moment where we are, we can only really have up to 20 women in the house at any one time. And too often, you know, the house will be full and there'll be more women knocking at the door. So we really hope that we don't have that problem as much in the new place, because we'll be able to double the number of women that we can have in the house at any one time in the new place. We also feel like the changes that are happening in King's Cross, Potts Point, you know, not as many clients who we work with live in the area anymore. But in the new place in Redfern, we're about 10 to 15 minutes walk from 3 really established public housing estates. So I think we'll have our work cut out for us, but that's what we want. And hoping that the new chapter will take us into the next 20 years or so.
I'd like to open the floor up now for anybody who'd like to ask Nicole some questions.
Nicole, thank you very much for your presentation and for your heartfelt sincerity and connection. It is so obvious, which is beautiful. How many paid staff do you have and how many volunteers?
Yes.
And then maybe if you could address what sort of successes are you having?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Ken. That's very kind of you to say. We have a paid staff of 7 at Lou's Place, and we have a roster of, I'm talking about normal times rather than COVID, so forgive me a little for that. COVID has gotten everything a bit skew-whiff, but when we're not in lockdown, we've got a rotation of around 100 volunteers who come through our service in a typical month. So it's a lot of people who come through and volunteer, 7 paid staff. And we do have some services that come in and outreach from our centre as well. So for example, St Vincent's Hospital have something that is called a homeless health team. And they're primarily doctors and nurses. They come and do outreach in our centre. There's a few services who do something like that for us. In terms of successes, you know, one of the things at Lou's is, you know, a bad day there doesn't get much worse. You know, you meet people who are in the thick of the worst times in their life. You know, they're sleeping rough. They might have had their children removed. They're beaten up and they're bruised and, you know, they're not doing too well. So those days are pretty tough. On the other hand, though, the good days at Lou's, they don't get much better, to be honest. Like, you see women who you might have met on one of those worst days a few months ago, and then you meet them a few months later sometimes, and with the right supports, you see them standing tall, growing in confidence, in a new home, starting to talk about, you know, what kind of job they want to do, and, you know, us linking them into TAFE and training and, you know, leaving violence for good and breaking that cycle for their own children is something that's really transformative. Yeah, the good days don't get much better. But it is a mix at Lou's. We do see both. I think, you know, childhood sexual abuse is one of those terrible things that does really break your heart. And, you know, it breaks mine most days at Lou's Place. You know, some of the women who have had such horrendous experiences in that regard, you know, often end up with drug and alcohol issues, and those issues do take time to work through and recover from. So we've got to have that long-term commitment. But I've been at Lou's for 4 years now, and I can say, you know, some of those people that I met in my first year, if you would have said to me they would be where they are now 4 years ago, I'm not sure even I would have thought it possible. I mean, there is something incredible about the human spirit and courage and the strength of people to recover and want to get well and to really turn things around. Like, it really, you know, that saying, it's never too late. I'm a champion on that one, I've got to say. You know, it really is never too late. And for sometimes people who walk in that you think, I'm not sure if this one is going to make it. And it breaks my heart to say that, because I'm a pretty optimistic and hopeful type of person. To do this work, I think you have to be. But some days you do worry if someone's going to get through it. But with the right support, the right care, some, you know, advocacy and love, it's incredible what people do turn around and rebuild and recover from. I've got to say, yeah. I hope that answers your question somewhat, Ken.
Nicole, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. I was just wondering, what types of roles are these 100 people on a monthly basis? What sort of functions and responsibilities do they have? And how is it best suited to your needs in terms of time dedicated per month on average, etc.? Yeah. Just curious.
Is it Mark? Thanks, Mark, for the question. You name it, they do it at Lou's Place, I can tell you that. People bring their skills and talents and what they're good at, and we really try and work with our staff strengths, our volunteers' strengths, and actually the women that we serve, the clients, their strengths as well. Our volunteers are incredible. You know, they cook, they teach yoga, they teach jewelry, they do massage. You know, we have someone who's a physiotherapist who comes in and does physio. You know, if you happen to get in touch with Lou's, be sure you'll be signed up for life, pretty much. We get you working and we stick to it. I've got to say, when I first joined Lou's, one of the most amazing things for me was meeting the volunteers. I remember it was probably my first week or two in the centre, and I, of course, was introducing myself to everyone at that time, walked into the kitchen and said, "Oh, g'day, I'm Nick, I'm the new manager around here, you know. How long have you been doing lunch here?" And someone said to me, "Oh, I haven't been here that long, Nick." I was like, "Oh, well, how long's that?" They were like, 6 years. So-and-so here's been here for 15, you know. And it's actually, be warned, Lou's Place stays in your blood, right? It's that kind of place, and there's plenty of volunteers who have been around for, you know, many, many years. There's a real pride in the service that is held by our volunteers, and we're so very grateful for them. Our longest serving volunteer has been there, would you believe, 20 years. She is a surgical nurse, and she has a 1 day off a fortnight. That day off a fortnight that she has, she comes in and cooks breakfast and lunch for Lou's, and she has done for 20 years. So she's an exceptional person, and the place is just full of exceptional women like that who give so much of their heart. And I guess what I would say is, you know, she comes in and she cooks lunch, but I feel like I'd almost be doing her a disservice just to talk about her lunch, and her lunch is awesome, by the way. But what she really does is come and cook lunch and has lots and lots of amazing, supportive, encouraging, beautiful conversations with the women who come in. And the lunch is kind of the second-hand bit, right? And I think that's part of the philosophy that we've got at Lou's, that it's a place where you can come and just be loved on, and have a lot of supportive, welcoming friends to talk to in many ways. one of my favorite things to do at Luz is when a new client comes in and we, need to do a little kind of orientation for them around the service. This is where this is where that is. And, before you know it, someone's like, chin up, love, it's not worth it. Someone else is like, hey, you, come and sit here. Before you know it, someone else, without even being asked, has just bought a cup of coffee for that person, and it's kind of cheering them on. And it's that kind of culture that we really try and create and support and nurture at Luz to help people on their way. Many of the women that we work with, they just haven't had that in their lives. So that is something that we can't take for granted that everyone in our community has. Unfortunately, so many people don't have a safe home base to go back to when things get tough or things go wrong. Like, I often think, I have a sister myself, God forbid something happened to her in her marriage. I mean, she's got a lovely and very supportive partner, but if something went wrong for her, she could always come and stay with me, right? But for the women that we work with, so many of them don't have an option like that. They're really relying on the systems to do their work, to be effective, to be available when they need them. And unfortunately, those systems are not always there. They're overrun, they're full. Sometimes they can be hard to access for some people. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you very much. The paid staff, I was just curious, sorry.
7. There's 7 of us. Yeah.
What do they do?
So the paid staff are all doing frontline roles. So you've got a general manager, that's myself, and then we've got case managers and community services workers. So everybody is involved with making the house run, and working with the people we support, running groups, running case management, managing the house, frontline, absolutely frontline roles. A lot of our kind of back end kind of work is done by volunteers.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nicole.
My pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Nice. Warwick, I think, is asking.
Warwick, you have to go off mute.
Yeah, hi, Nicole.
Hi, Warwick.
G'day. Just a quick one. I recall when Thomas and I came to see you a couple of years ago, there was a bit of a ruckus going on downstairs, and I think you said, oh, look, I have to attend to that, and the woman was sort of being very loud and noisy, and she went, then I think they called the police, and the police came and took her away, and then you said she'll go to St. Vincent's and they'll keep her overnight, and then she'll be back on the street the next day.
Yeah.
So the mental health aspect is really quite strong with a lot of your guests.
Yeah.
And the other thing I recall you said, there's a really big increase in the over 50s.
Yeah.
Cohort of women who really find it really tough, and that really stuck with me. I thought about that quite a bit. So could you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. It breaks my heart when I see some of the elderly, I mean, when all the women, but some of the elderly women who are at our service, it's just, it's not what you hope you'd be doing at that time of life, let's put it that way. I mean, the oldest person who we served in the last year was 82. When we met her, she was sleeping in her car. I mean, we've got to do better than that as a community. It's just heartbreaking. Yeah, you're spot on, Warwick. It's really hard. There's not enough social housing for those women in particular. in our community, and certainly Luz is a member of organisations such as Homelessness New South Wales, who do an incredible job in advocating and trying to encourage the government to put a bit more funding into some of those options for people. I think you're right. Luz is a low barrier service, and what that means is that almost anybody can get into our place. A lot of the women that work with us at Luz would be screened out of other services. So for many community services, if you're using drugs, for example, you're not allowed to access that service. If you're, if you have a psychotic illness, you're not allowed to use that service. You would be screened out as ineligible. Women who are hearing things and seeing things and have diagnoses of psychotic illnesses are welcome at Luz Place. Every day we are there, we have those women in our centre. Those women have nowhere else to go. We need to make sure that they are welcome at our centre. We're filling a gap in that way. And it's certainly a bit of a bugbear and frustration of mine that many services don't accept those women. They require careful management, of course, but, with the right skills and the right staff, people can be managed safely. It's very, very rare that we have to exclude someone because they're not safe to be in their house. But many services do exclude the women we work with quite frequently, if I'm honest. You're right. I think there's a real... What we talk about often is the missing middle in mental health services. So if you're a general member of the community, I think often you would have the impression that there's a lot of mental health services because there's a lot of health promotion mental health services, and they do a great job. The Beyond Blues, the Black Dogs, those organisations that talk about kind of mental health promotion in our community. My hat goes off to them. But at the other end, if you are in a suicidal crisis, you will be able to get into hospital. So there are services at that really pointy end, but where are all the services for people in the middle? Not people who just need a bit of health promotion, activity and support of, sleep a bit better and here's 10 sessions can kind of do it. The people who need more than that, but aren't suicidal yet and need to be in hospital, there really isn't much around for those people at all. And in particular, free treatment for those people. For most of the women we serve, they don't have health insurance that can cover them off or get them through. They can't afford what other services might exist in the community. So what ends up happening is for those people, they don't have any service, and then they just continue to get worse and worse and worse. And I've got to say, sometimes when people say to me, Nick, talk to me about, the good results that you see in the community in your work at Luz Place, for me, that can be a challenging question because I'm working with systems in our community that are really broken. The housing system is really broken. The mental health system is really broken. What I can achieve in my centre with the 60 or so people who come through my centre in a typical day is limited because those systems aren't working really well. And sometimes we are just kind of patching people up until we can get them more of the right support. But sometimes even linking them into the right supports, it's really hard because those things just don't exist and they're not there. But, we got to keep at it and we got to live to fight another day and, just keep trying. And one of the things that I often joke about is that if one day someone calls in all the favours that I've begged and borrowed over the years, you will see me running for the hills. So often my work is around, g'day, it's Nick from Luz, how are you going? I've got a big favour to ask. If someone calls in all those favours one day, I'm in big trouble.
Nicole, I want to
hand up.
Anybody else have any comments? Nicole, I really want to thank you for taking the time to touch our hearts tonight.
Yeah.
It's humbling to hear you describe the work that you do. I'm particularly touched by the fact that although I know the Marmalade Foundation has been the basis of this has to be a community effort. And I think that any organization that has decided to go it alone and be inclusive, we as Rotarians should be supporting to the hilt. And I want to tell you that I feel like that we can do a lot better too. I just got an email today that the new funding year for the Rotary Australia, the grants have to be in by the 1st of August. And I don't know exactly how to define what your needs are, but I'm going to ask you and Dale to get together and see if we can define some needs that we as Rotarians can address to the fullest extent that we're capable of. I think also that as you make your move down to Redfern, just because you made your move doesn't mean that you're not in our community. We still look at you as part of our community, and we'll continue to engage and help Lou's Place in any way that we can.
Thank you.
I think that I join with the rest of the club by saying that the nurturing culture that you create, and at the end of the day, helping people who need help. Yes, it is about the services, but boy, it's all about the culture, isn't it? People will not come back if they don't feel like the culture is nurturing. And so I really have to say you're doing a great job on that. I remember when Warwick and I went down that one day, and Mark's question about what do these people do? I remember the two people on the front on the telephone. All they did was call people asking, did they have a place for a homeless woman to spend the night? All they kept getting was rejection, rejection, rejection. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, those are really special people, because they would just hang up, dial again, ask the same questions. Wow, it was just really, really amazing to me. So I want to say thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and helping us to come to grips also with our responsibility as a club, as Rotarians, as humans, to help you, to help the people that you help. I think you're doing great things. And as you move down to Redfern, please reach out to us with your needs. We'll do our very best to help you.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for listening and indulging me. And it's so lovely to, meet you all again. And it's been lovely to just, be in touch. And I think, we're all community minded, and we all want to do better for the women that we serve. I think you're right, Thomas. We're a stubborn old mob at Lou's Place. Right? We just keep trying until they're sick of us. But sometimes that's what it's going to take. Like the systems aren't working properly, and we can't pretend they are. We just see too often in our work that if those women that we support don't have someone with them, that's the really scary kind of time. Actually, so often we hear like a woman who'll walk in and will say, there's probably nothing you can do to help me. I've tried this one, I've tried that one. And we're like, all right, let's try them again. And they're like, don't try them again. I just spoke to them. And we're like, let's try them again. And sometimes actually, you know, it's terrible to say, but when we try again, we have more luck than the person themselves had when they first tried by themselves. But sometimes, you know, the nature of systems, when a system knows someone else is watching and someone else isn't going to let that slide, and someone else is going to raise it with the manager, and someone else is going to be a bit of a pain in the butt, if I'm honest, it helps people get a little bit of just the basic things they need. So yeah, that's certainly a huge part of our job. But thank you so much, everyone, for your kindness and support. Really grateful for that, and really looking forward to, you know, embracing you all face to face at some point and welcoming you to the new place in Redfern.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. God bless you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll leave you to it, but best of luck with all of your work as well. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Dale. Thanks, everyone.